Harpoons. One rainy Saturday morning, around his 13th birthday, Angelo accompanies his father out to the suburbs, their destination a diner called Democracy, where Tasso Kotouvelis has been installing new lighting. The owner, a man named Zacharias Skurtis, whom Angelo has never met, insists they come enjoy a complimentary breakfast. On the drive over, the pair say little, both content to enjoy the sounds of classic Stevie Wonder on the stereo, Angelo stealing side glances at his father. He pays particular attention to the man's posture behind the wheel, slightly slouched, steering with one hand, the other flicking a string of amber comboloi. He wonders what Dad is thinking, what great secrets his furrowed brow conceal, but Angelo can't find the words to ask him, unsure what he'd even do with such insights were they revealed. These weekend excursions with his father have increased over the past few months, Angelo possessing a vague sense that they are meant on some level to help him transition into adolescence. They arrive at Democracy Diner, an A-frame building of white and blue exterior. Upon entry, Angelo marvels at the custom bubblegum machine, its base a statue of Atlas holding up a world of multicolored candies. "Ah, you must be Angelo. Your father has spoken much about you. The girls better watch out. You're even more handsome than your patera." Angelo smiles, feeling his cheeks flush, as he takes the hand of Mr. Skurtis, a man around his father's age, with eyes the color of Tasso's string of worry beads. "Efaristo ke hieropoli," Angelo says. "Ah, the boy speaks Greek and with good accent, bravo." Angelo looks to his father and experiences a rising sensation in his chest, as though his heart has sprung wings at the sight of the man's approving smile. The feeling is short-lived, however, as Tasso replies, "Meh, he speaks pretty well. Of course, it won't do him much good when trying to talk to American girls. He has some trouble with them, nervous, I guess, though he is still young." Angelo lowers his gaze, and when he looks up again, Mr. Skurtis regards him as though he's a complete stranger. "Trouble with girls, with this guy as your father?" Mr. Skurtis asks. "Unbelievable." Angelo feels heat at his cheeks a second time, again averts his eyes. His father and Mr. Skurtis converse in Greek at a pace and fluency with which he can't keep up, and Angelo wanders back over to the bubblegum machine, eyeing his tiny reflection in each bright little ball. Angelo and his father eat at the counter, Mr. Skurtis serving them plates of eggs over easy, hash browns, Greek sausage, and toast with hunks of feta cheese. The men resume their conversation in their mother tongue, and Angelo is content to focus on his breakfast. He eyes various knickknacks, salt and pepper shaker statuettes of Zeus and Hera, napkin holders shaped like ancient ships. There are framed pictures of the Parthenon on the wall behind the counter, and between them, Angelo spots a sizable photograph of two men, in their late teens or early 20s, he guesses, standing at the edge of a cobblestone harbor, the ocean at their backs. They wear their hair curly and long, and are clad in wide-collared button-down shirts open at the chest to expose their muscular torsos, identical gold chains encircling their necks, and pants that flare out at the ankles. The men are flanked by women, their forms just visible at the edges of the frame. Angelo eyes the picture as he eats, unable to shift his attention. Something about their piercing gazes and broad-shouldered stances resonates with him to the degree that he finds himself posing in the reflection of the chrome espresso machine, trying to mimic their supreme air of confidence. Then he hears his father's laughter and goes red in the face yet again. "Tikani sekire," Tasso says, and then, "I see now, you like the picture, eh? Recognize those two?" Angelo takes another look at the photo and suddenly it dawns on him, only surprising that he hadn't realized sooner that the men are none other than his own father and Zacharias Skurtis. "You guys look cool," Angelo says. His father sets his fork down and lays a hand on his shoulder. "Summer of 1979, Mr. Skurtis finishes for him. Angelo's father snaps his finger in apparent affirmation. Yes, sometime before you were born, of course, Angelo. Those were the days. I was just 20 in that photo. Zacharia and I are from the same town, but there we were on the island of Spetses. You remember from the last trip, eh? Angelo almost reminds his father that it has been a mere 3 years since their most recent visit to Greece, but he just nods instead. From behind the counter, Mr. Scortis refills Tasso's coffee, then Angelo's juice, before leaning his hairy forearms against the formica and adding, "Summer of 1979, the year your father and I established ourselves as the kings of the Kamaki. Has he told you the stories?" Angelo glances from his father to the photograph, then back to Mr. Scortis before shaking his head. Mr. Scortis seems to regard Angelo's father with some surprise, then he says, "Topedine, what, 13 years old now? It's time he learns the truth." Angelo, his heart rattling in his chest with the frenzy of a caged bird, senses that that which has long been hanging in the air between he and his father will finally be revealed. Tasso looks to Mr. Scortis, who gestures a pushing motion with his open hands, as though to give Angelo's father a final boost, and then Tasso leans forward on his stool. "There was a group of us young guys," he says, "old friends from the Jorio, and they looked to Mr. Scortis as a leader, though I'm not sure why." No, Mr. Scortis chimes in. "They looked to you as a leader. Yati sepoli mangas." Tasso chuckles. "That's not quite how I remember it." "Your father, he had the extra confidence," Mr. Scortis says. Tasso shrugs. "It is a typically Greek quality, but perhaps all the Koutouvlis men have more than the usual." Angelo wants to remind his father that the trait has apparently skipped a generation, but he still keeps quiet. "Your father would walk down the street like this," Mr. Scortis says, stepping out from behind the counter to demonstrate a square-shouldered strut, his arms held slightly away from his body. "Mr. Cool." Tasso laughs. "Don't pay attention to this guy, Angelo. He is known to exaggerate. Anyhow, you must understand Greece was regaining a sense of freedom at that time, after years under military rule. The Greek girls were still very sheltered, but the towns were flooded with tourists from France, Germany, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, blonde-haired, blue-eyed women everywhere. And when your father saw one he liked," Mr. Scortis begins, "he went right for her, just like a true kamaki. That is the Greek word for harpoon," Angelo cuts in. "Bravo to Alinikasu," says Mr. Scortis. "But also hustler or flirt. Catalaves." Angelo nods again. "As I said, Mr. Scortis is good at spinning tales," Tasso says. "I didn't know much English then, but obviously I didn't know any German or Finnish or Danish or whatever. So I would say to them, 'Mademoiselle, you are beautiful. How do you enjoy Greece? Would you like to go for a drink or dance?' Angelo looks to Mr. Scortis, who nods in confirmation of the story. Most of the time, Tasso says, the women just ignore me. "Ha!" exclaims Mr. Scortis. "As I recall, it was typical for your father to go with 4 women in one day." That's not exactly, but Angelo, with eyes wide, cuts in to ask, "To dance?" Mr. Scortis flashes a smile. "Oh, hire, to bed." Angelo's eyes go even wider. He looks to his father, but the man only shakes his head. "No, I remember," says Mr. Scortis. "It was definitely 4 in one day average." Tasso smirks. "I think you have your past confused with my own. Understand, Angelo, things were different back then. In most parts of the world, including Greece, it was much more open. Sex was no big deal. I know you're growing up, and girls will start chasing you like they occasionally chase me. And I want you to understand the power you have and to use it wisely. But definitely use it when you are ready." Angelo can't help but think of his Spider-Man comics. With great power comes great responsibility. "The gift of the Kamaki," he asks. "Yes," says Mr. Scortis. Tasso adds, "Gone are the glory days of the Kamaki in high numbers." He laughs, then says, "But who knows? You may follow in Mr. Scortis' footsteps and lead a new generation." Angelo lowers his eyes. "I never even kissed a girl." Tasso just waves. "It's nothing to be ashamed. You have time. Now finish your breakfast." Later, back in the car on the way home, Angelo can't look at his father without picturing the man as a 20-year-old Lothario, despite Tasso's inexplicable efforts to downplay his past. It's a bit like discovering the man is a superhero, and Angelo wonders when his own powers will reveal themselves. He supposes he can hold off investing in a suit and cape, at least until he sprouts his first few chest hairs, sure signs of the emergence of his inner Kamaki. He smiles to himself, sensing even then that this is a morning he will long remember.